of course my company, DRB HiCom, to address this distinguished gathering this morning. It was in 2004 when PLF first organized this discourse. The objective was clear: to facilitate knowledge sharing and dialogue on issues of national interest between eminent Malaysian leaders and young Malaysians. Based on my short 10 minutes with Tan Sri at the table at breakfast just now, I can guarantee that this will be a very interesting discussion this morning. PLF has been privileged to host eminent leaders at this discourse, including, of course, former Prime Minister and Honorary President Yang Amat Bahagia Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, the late Tun Arsyad Ayub, Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, Tan Sri Rafidah Aziz, Tan Sri Amrin Wang, among others. So today, we are glad and very honored to add to this list of eminent people, educationists and scientists, Professor Tan Sri Datuk Zul, Director of IIUM, into this discourse. This is the 23rd edition of the discourse in 2023, and I must say that in the few that I've attended in the last few years, this is one of the more interesting discourses that occur in our beloved nation. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of issues and challenges faced by the youth of today in Malaysia or elsewhere. Many are concerned about job prospects and economic uncertainties, and in this changing business environment where there are a lot of distortions happening around the world, this has become more amplified. There's also climate change and digital disruptions that I mentioned earlier that changes the natural and business landscapes of the world. So what will the future be for the young people who will inherit it? And perhaps, if I can be a bit dramatic, how will they operate in this change landscape? But more importantly, what is their role as youth to shape what happens today and tomorrow to ensure their own future? This is an important question because in Malaysia alone, 16%, in ASEAN 34%, and in the world 16% of 1.2 billion people are made up of young people between 15 and 24. The DRB HiCom has always been a supporter of the youth development in Malaysia. In our role in nation building over the last 30 years, the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector is something that we believe in, and organizations such as PLF is vital for the sustained progress of our economy to nurture the future leaders of this country. I would like to express also my sincere gratitude to the distinguished speakers and panelists who have graciously accepted the invitation to share their expertise and insights. Your presence and contribution today will undoubtedly enrich the knowledge of the participants in this discourse. Before we start the discourse, I am now privileged to introduce our keynote speaker, Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Zul. Tan Sri Dzulkifli is a distinguished Malaysian academic, educationist and scientist who has made significant contributions to higher education and research both nationally and internationally. Tan Sri's academic journey began at the prestigious Malay College Kuala Kangsar, MCKK, where he developed a passion for science. So he pursued his undergraduate studies at USM, earning a Bachelor of Pharmacy degree, and then furthered his education at University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, where he obtained a Master of Science degree in Pharmacology. Tan Sri's academic career has been marked by numerous achievements and accolades as well. He has held various prominent positions, including serving as the Vice Chancellor of USM for 11 years, where he led the university's transformation into a leading research institution. And then as Rector of IIUM, he is now spearheading initiatives to strengthen the university's research capacity, enhancing its international partnerships and foster a vibrant learning environment. Tan Sri has also served as the President of the International Association of Universities, IAU, the first Malaysian to be appointed to this position since the inception of the organization. For his contributions to research and education, he has been awarded numerous honors, including the prestigious 2017 Gilbert Medal by Universitas 21, a global consortium of leading research-intensive universities. Tan Sri Dr. Dzulkifli's contributions extend, of course, beyond the confines of academia, he has regularly shared his insights and perspectives on education, development, and science through news and magazine columns. I think it is without doubt that Tan Sri's exemplified unwavering dedication to education, research, and societal progress is vital in today's discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us now welcome the keynote speaker, Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Dzulkifli Abdul Razak. Tan Sri.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Terima kasih. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu asyrafil anbiya mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Greeting of peace and a very good morning to Brother Mahmud Razak Bahman, I think. And everybody who is involved here. In the IIU, we just address you as brothers and sisters. Yeah, and I think that gives the kind of, aura and relationship that we have even before we start. I'm indeed very grateful and thank you very much for the generous CV. I'm only very embarrassed when you read CV, because you're telling people how good you are and your presentation people would not know how. Like at the end of the day, ini je ni present, with all this glorifying CV that we are all trained in academia. You must tell people how good you are. Suddenly you are not as good as what CV says. So CVs to me basically should be forgotten and let people judge you the way you want to present. At the end of the day, they will know who you are given your presentation. The CV was very generous, and one correction that I want to make, I didn't choose to be a science student. I want to do architecture. But then at that particular time, there was not enough Malays in the academic scientific stream. And if you do slightly better in science, they will say, go and do science. I was good in arts. I used to win a lot of prizes, even at the world level when I was in Standard 6, the 4th World Children Art Exhibition in Korea, and I thought I would advance that. But then I was pushed to the science stream, and I lost that altogether. And I keep on regretting that why I don't do the arts, and the science is not that quote-unquote magical anyway. So now that I've been the Vice Chancellor of a science university, the first handicap that I had was I do not know humanities and social science. And that made me less a human being, and therefore I feel that I'm cheated of my education. So the first lesson that I want to bring forth is basically that we are all human beings and we must be human to start off with. Science can come second, and I worry now when you talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, where is the human dimension? So as a science student, I learned how to work with animals, rabbit, monkeys, mice, cats, whatever it is. I learned how to work with machines, but I do not know how to work with people. Once the product is there for the marketing, then we will approach people. By then, you have really lose the language of how to attend and how to know people. I think that's the first lesson that I think we need to undertake when we talk about youth and youth empowerment. Anyway, I've been given this title and I love this title. The only regret is that I'm no longer youth. I'm at my early 70s, but I still remember what youth looks like, and I will try to recall this and bring this to the fore. Can I have the... Oh, here, yeah. All right, my presentation is normally very graphical because, like I say, I'm an arts person. We use the right brain more than the left brain. Does this work this way? Mana yang ditekan dia? Ini. So technology also delude me all the time. This one. Forward. Oh, pointer. Okay, let's try. Okay. So I've made some changes in the title, as you can see. The power of youth is the crux of the whole thing. Better future is, of course, and I'm not too sure whether I'm going to talk about better future or the lesser future. I want to add the word social, because one of my fight today is basically on health. That vape things, which is basically concerning youth. I want to bring that up. And I also want to introduce this whole idea of the Anthropocene. This is a vocabulary that has not been mentioned much, but we are already in the Anthropocene age. And until and unless you know what the Anthropocene age is all about, then I think we keep on imagining that the future is there and a better future it is, but it is not, right? So the Anthropocene, I think, is a key word for most of you youth, because we are already in that age, and you need to understand that very, very well. Yeah? What are my credentials? And to talk about this, in the last 5 years in IUM, we are able to do a number of things. Once, we have been recognized by United Nations University as the regional centers of expertise for sustainable development. We've got the authority and the capacity to organize courses on sustainable development at the United Nations level, and we've been doing this since the last 3 or 4 years. We have got a center called now the RCE Greater Gombak. Now, RCE was an idea of the first rector of United Nations University. When we look at the university today and we asked whether this university is meant for sustainable development or otherwise, the kind of structure that we've got, the 20 or whatever number that we've got in the university, and the question we ask ourselves, can this university carry itself forward to realize the whole idea of sustainable development? And I think all of us say no, because this university is born out of the Industrial Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution is the one that caused the world what it is today. And therefore, we don't expect this model to fight for sustainable development. So we come up with another idea called the RCE. We definitely do not use the word university, because the university itself has a lot of excess baggage. And therefore, the RCE was meant to be the university of the future. And it is organized quite differently from the university that you know now, with Kabole Pasaran and all those jargons that we got and all sorts of things, and which is absent in the RCE. RCE talks about different things, which we will go into later on, and that is what it is meant. So it is the harbinger of the next university that is going to meet the subject or the what you call target of sustainable development. Just to show what it is worth, I think in the year 2020, IUM was voted by United Nations as the best institution for sustainable development. So it gives a kind of a vindication that we have been working what we are supposed to do in the context of sustainability and sustainable development, moving the future. And last year we were given the honor to host a chair on future studies. So the university is also authorized to predict the future. In other words, to look at not in 5 years or 10 years time, but in kind of a generational future. What is it that we are targeting for one generation, so that we can start to prepare for the next generation, not this 5-year plan that the government changed and the next government will change it today and the next day, and we can never have a very fixed idea of what the future looks like moving forward. So that's a credential that I hope you will bear with me if you're asking what is this old man trying to tell us youth what to do. So that's a credential that I will use today. If you can tone down what you call lights, and you probably will see better. So the context is about the future, and I think all of us know about the future in many ways. One is, of course, the word VUCA. I think by now everybody knows what VUCA is all about. Volatile, ambitious, was it? No, uncertain, complex, and ambitious. So, in other words, we are never certain of what we are going to head for, and therefore makes planning very difficult. This whole idea is a military idea. It comes from the military sort of groups of people who wants to predict what the future and how to fight the war, and they coined this word VUCA, and people are beginning to adopt it. The market's beginning to adopt it, and everybody says now, oh, we are in a very volatile, uncertain, and complex and ambitious. And certainly, if you look around Malaysia now, we are in everything but VUCA. Yeah? We are not certain even now what is happening and who is doing what and so on and so forth. Yeah? And when the Prime Minister talked about the reshuffle, we thought it is just time to do so that we can be better certain on it. There are a lot of public political analysis here. My brother Siva, yeah, he can tell you better of what VUCA is all about. So some people are not happy with VUCA and they coin another one. They call it BANI. BANI is brittle, A is anxious, N is non-linear, and I is comprehensible. When I look at it, it's almost like VUCA. If you are volatile, therefore you are also brittle at the same time. Yeah? If you are uncertain, therefore you are anxious. All right? If you are non-linear, therefore you're complex in a way. And if you're ambiguous, and therefore it's incomprehensible. So I say, what is the difference between these two? So we are good also at coining things and now don't know where to do with it. You've got VUCA in one hand and BANI at the other hand. What do you do in between? Yeah? So people like me will be a little bit adventurous. I throw this out and I create my own. My own, it comes from what I've observed as far as a new environment created by the pandemic. I've been with USM for 10 years and I thought I finished with this Vice-Chancellor thing. Now when I become the rector in RUM, suddenly the pandemic comes in. I have to start with zero again. 11 years, nobody talks about the pandemic and how to manage a university in that kind of an environment. So I studied this very well and I say, well, what do I call this, this era? And I come up with a very nice name that all of you would imagine, not coming from an Islamic university. It's vodka. You know what vodka is all about. The Russian, what you call drink. If you go to Russia, they say you must drink vodka, otherwise you'll freeze to death. I've been to Russia just 2 months ago, almost freeze to death, but my vodka is a different vodka. So from this vodka, I created my own with only changing the K to a C. All right? So what this vodka, so that we can think of a different way of looking. Because some of these things that come, sometimes it comes from the West, and it is coined by their own assessment of what the situation is. So like it or not, we are already fitted into their own way of thinking and trying to find our way using their paradigm and their perspective. And we lose our perspectives in many respects. So in my vodka, I try to use our own perspective, listening and seeing what is happening around us. Although within the 3 years or so, not a very long time, but it is enough in terms of significance impact that we can think. My first V will be vulnerability. In other words, in this whole idea of vodka, that everybody is involved, not just a business person or the bureaucracy or the political groups or whatever. Everybody is involved. As long as you are here, you will be involved. It doesn't matter what age, what group, where you come from. In other words, everything is almost neutralized, that everybody must subscribe to the same vision if you want to survive together. And this is where the kita jaga kita kind of thing. You know, that we must look after everybody else. You must look after your neighbors. If you don't look after your neighbor, then all of us become vulnerable. And that vulnerability is the thing that will change everything around. You could be a big guy today, but under this vodka thing or under the pandemic, you can be a nobody tomorrow. Yeah? And that nobody tomorrow is what an O is all about. You can even go, you can be totally obsolete. You may not be existing anymore, or in the real sense of the word, jobs are gone, you know, some of the structures you have is no longer there, and you need to reinvent all the time what is it to make you sure that you are surviving in that environment. So being obsolete tomorrow is something we take sometimes not for granted, but it's going to happen in terms of many things around us. So the question of obsolescence will be another issue. If you're not obsolete, never mind, but it's going to be disruptive. It will be disruptive to a certain extent. It becomes non-functional also, right? So you may be existing, but you do not know how to fit into an environment. Work from home, for example, something that just dawned on us. And some of us do not know how to behave when you talk about work from home. Some of us who work from home, the home is not a place to work to start off with. Yeah? You've got 7 children, you've got 2 bedrooms. How do you work in this kind of environment? And this is the thing that's going to happen all the time. Yeah? And how do we actually adjust to this, the whole idea of being disruptive? And disruptive is to the extent that it will cause a collapse. And that collapse, I think, is real. We have got some evidence of this. And this is the collapse that is bringing us into this whole paradigm called the Anthropocene. So the vodka talked about the Anthropocene in a context of what we are in already, whether you like it or not. There's enough scientific evidence to show that we have been in the Anthropocene since 1950. I think they just announced it. There are many sites in the world to show that the world has changed from what it was before to something which is new, and it is almost frightening. So this is a framework that I'm going to use at the end of the day, and this is a framework that tells us about the future, all right? And it's only that the future, if you use this framework of the Anthropocene, it is a very dehumanizing world, whether we like it or not. Right? So if you talk about a better future, I'm not too sure whether the future will be a better one until and unless we do certain things. And that certain things will come back to education, which I will talk to you towards the end of the time. If I run out of time, can you just, yeah? So what is Anthropocene? Anthropocene is the age of human being destroying its own civilization. Before Anthropocene, we are in the age called the Holocene. We survived in 12,000 years, and that's the age where everything is almost conducive for us human beings to move from one era to another era to create a civilization what we see it is now. This civilization takes more than 10,000 years to develop, all right? Various ways and various means. But here we are, we survive as a species over that 10,000 years or so. But beginning with the 1950s, you will see that evidence later on, we begin to dismantle this civilization. Look around you. We are doing so many things that will talk about the survival of the human being, first being the climate change, the global warming. That is the first evidence that we are beginning to dismantle our own civilization, and we are fighting hard for it, and there is no solution moving forward, and that's why the VUCA, the AWANI, and mild vodka comes into picture. So the Earth has entered into a new era called the Anthropocene. Remember this word, Anthropocene? And this is where we are dismantling our civilization into a very dehumanizing one. We may still people moving around as human beings, but they have been dehumanized in many, many ways and in many, many senses of the word. We will go into that probably later. Yeah? So at the end of the day, there will be a time where we will see some of this happening. What do you mean by Anthropocene? If you go to the 1970s, and 1700s, sorry, to now, this is where we begin to see the difference in terms of growth, the so-called civilization. Some people want to use the word Madani, that's fine, but civilization is a real word that we want to use here. And you can see how we have moved. Yeah? GDP has gone up. Everything that you talk about there, everything has gone up. And it's gone up in an exponential thing, what we call the Great Acceleration. The Great Acceleration is the one that tells us we are beginning to deconstruct this civilization, because everything that goes up must come down. That's the rule of the game. You cannot be growing all the time. And this is where I think the destruction of the civilization comes into being. Okay? So what this is all about, and we talk about then, there is a book that I think all of you must read. It came out in 2014 by Noemi Orokes and Eric Conway. It talks about the collapse of the Western civilization. And this book argues, if you follow this path to the letter, you will get the world collapsing in the year 2093, less than 100 years from now. This whole Western civilization created by the Holocene, as it were, will collapse before this century is out. And this is what I was talking about when you talk about the Holocene. Yeah? So the world becomes unsustainable. Do whatever you want to do. If you follow this path, this is where you end. Yeah? And then here we add in the technology. So everybody talks about the fourth industrial revolution. I was a vice chancellor then, and the Minister of Education talked about, we want to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, create a curriculum for the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. My question to the Minister, where is the curriculum for the third industrial revolution? Indeed, where is the curriculum for the second industrial revolution? Where is the curriculum for the first industrial revolution? The second industrial revolution talks about electricity. All right? You want to go into the fourth industrial revolution, you must have electricity. How many of our people in Malaysia have electricity? 60% has no electricity still. How do you go into how can you jump into IR 4.0 if your IR 4.2 is not complete even now? You're still talking about Starlink and whatever it is worth. Yeah? We cannot go into 4. Then you will go into 4 IR only in the exclusive sense. The people who are there, the urban people who have got rich and money, and then they can go into the 4 IR. In other words, the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider and wider and wider. Because you have not completed 4 the Industrial Revolution 1, 2, and 3. Also computer. You remember during the pandemic, our brothers and sisters in Sabah has to climb trees to get connection. Yeah? How can you talk about 4 IR when still people needs to climb trees to get connection at the level of 3.0, which is supposed to be around the 1900s. All right? So 4 IR is not an episode, it is a continuum. You need to understand that. If the continuum is incomplete, then the 4 IR will definitely fail. Talk about 5G now, it will definitely fail. Because you don't have the continuum to mark the way it should be. Okay? So this is where I think we begin to argue whether this 4 IR is necessary or not. And the 4 IR begins in this, the Anthropocene begins at that point, what we call the great acceleration, where everything moves up. Your generation will be responsible for this. The younger generation will want everything to go up. Everything must be in quick time, and this and that, and this and that. And these are already structured in that way. The algorithm is written in such a way that we will be facing the collapse, whether we want it or not, until and unless we change the algorithm. And the algorithm now under AI is already fitted into such a dimension that we are not able to change it. If we are able to change it, alhamdulillah, that will be one of the roles that we need to play and see whether that algorithm fits into the future of the university as such, or the system as such. So the Anthropocene starts in 1950s already, and now it's advancing more and more as you talk about the ChatGPT and whatever else you're talking about. That is the future, and whether that future is better for you is something for you to decide. Yeah? If it's not, then what else we can do for it? So at this point, I think the future will not be better. The future will be for the West, until and unless we do something about it. And here is the evidence. When the pandemic comes in, then suddenly you find that the future is almost dead. We are not allowed to move, you know, things that has never happened before. We are supposed to subscribe into a way that whatever freedom or liberty we have, the little that we have, we need to sacrifice that. And we need to understand the world better than what we have been told in our classroom or in our playlist or by the politicians. All those things that they told us previously do not apply anymore, and that's where the obsolete things come in. Yeah? The whole culture almost become a toxic culture, and the toxic culture is defined by many ways. Many of us are experiencing the burnt out. People are resigning from work, it's not adequately prepared for the kind of work that they're supposed to do, or in an environment that is so-called burnt out, all right? And the worst of the burnt out will be people facing emotional distress, spiritual distress. Suicide rate goes up. In the university, we begin to detect this, okay? And now the question of mental health will be the new pandemic. And the mental health is almost just like your COVID-19. You will not know whether you've got the mental health or not until you are tested. And what sort of tests are we going to subject ourselves to? In the millions. Yeah? Even providing the test for COVID is difficult already. How do you test everybody in every minute? Today you may not be stressful, tomorrow you may be stressful. All right? And this is, I think, one of the bigger problems that all of us, or the future generation, is going to face. Okay? Now, sometimes it's stress a little bit of change. You already feel the stress. Some people are experiencing the long COVID. Part of it is stress, psychological stress. And all this stress now is something which is not measured. When you go to university, normally we need to know your physical health, as it were. Now we also need to know your mental health. Because the people that are coming to university, at least in my university, there are already indications of these people having mental health, as it were, that they do not know. There are cases of people who want to commit suicide. We detect them, and then we call in their parents. Their parents say, I don't want to do anything with her. You look after them. You know? And sometimes a parent came to the university and they say, I don't want to go back to my family. My family is the one that gives me the stress level. So it becomes now a family problem. It's no longer an institutional problem. And if the family is not set right, then imagine what sort of problems we're going to face. And this is a problem of the youth of the future. Okay? The whole world becomes upside down. Whatever is right today is wrong tomorrow. Whatever is wrong tomorrow is right the next day. All this whole other of the fake news, post-truth and whatever, you do not know what to trust now. You do not know who to believe now. Yeah? Whereas the two conditions that is set for this era is about, can I trust you, can I respect you? These are the two things that we want to know. Doesn't matter whether you've got PhD or emeritus professor, that doesn't matter. If I cannot trust you and if I cannot respect you, that's it. We have come to that bottom line now. So when you look at your politician, ask these two questions. Can I respect him and can I trust him? If you cannot, then I think you can forget about him or her in this particular respect. Yeah? These are the two things which is very, 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 very important for us to make our judgment moving forward. And of course, it comes down to the whole question of values, to the whole question of virtues, and to the whole question of ethics. And that is also now being nullified in so many ways, in so many incidences, as you can see around us. Yeah? So that is the toxic culture that we are breeding under the Anthropocene. Whether we like it or not, you can sense that it's happening. Maybe not in your family, but sometimes in your workplace. Not in your workplace, sometimes in the institutions that you're working. Not in the institutions, sometimes in the whole political scenario that we are facing today. Maybe locally, maybe globally as such. Yeah? The Palestinian and the Gaza sort of, not war, but aggression tells us exactly where we are in terms of this toxic culture globally. So this will be the kind of future that we will be facing until and unless you know how to work with them. Yeah? So how do you try to understand this? As an educationist, I will try to understand it from what we were trying to do before the COVID. The university then was structured pre-COVID, what I call the 3 M's. We are there to quote-unquote produce manpower. The word manpower alone is not the right word. Huh? I thought human power would be the better one. Yeah? But 75% of my students at IUM are females. So we don't produce manpower as such. A woman power maybe. Yeah? But to be linguistically right, maybe human power. But we are producing manpower using this structure called the factory, called the university. Something goes in, something comes out. And that's meant for certain groups of keboleh pasaran, marketability, graduate employment, and so on and so forth. It's about a particular sector that we are quote-unquote beholden to for one reason or the other. Right? So this education is what we call the education without soul. Because at the end of the day, this manpower training is about training your mind and training you how to use some sort of a gadget, the way that I was trained as a science student. Work with this machine, and this machine has to be high-tech. And this machine will produce something for the marketplace, if you want to put another M there. All right? And this is the one that we say, where is the human person in this process? Do you know who you are? Dzulkifli Razak, who is he? Yeah? Do I know who I am? When the Greeks start education, they start know thyself. Do you know who you are? Before you can even handle this whole, what you call change around you. Before you do that, you need to know who you are. Yeah? And therefore, this is the one that is causing, there's a lot of toxic environment in the university itself. We start off with the ranking game. There's a major toxicity involved there. I think United Nations report just released about 2 months ago that talks about ranking world have a long-term negative impact on universities. But look how we celebrate the so-called ranking thing, paying millions of dollars on it, and they are discouraging us from going into this kind of a toxic environment. So we need to move into the 21st century, and moving to the 21st century is moving the 3M to the 3H. What is a 3H? 3H is, the pandemic tells us we are not alone. We need to talk about humanity. We need to talk about the people of the same species, regardless race, religion, geopolitical, ideology, whatever it is. We need to understand we are the same group of people. And it doesn't matter who they are, we need to save each other from the kind of demise that all of us are facing in the future. So we need to expand this whole idea that the university is not for Malaysia or a group of people in Malaysia, it is for the whole humanity, as it were. How do you embrace this as part and parcel of the ethos of education at that particular point? Yeah? We're talking about the mindset, now we are talking about the heart set. We understand, at least from our civilization, that the other seat of learning is not just the mind, it's also the heart. And I think research is showing that these two are working together. Unless you get your heart reconstructed, your mind will not be working as good as it is. How do you make this thing work? And how do you actually teach this in a classroom? Which is not there for the moment in time, because under the Renaissance, all the spiritual thing has been thrown out. They say only the age of reason. The age of divinity, the age of revelation is not there, and this is where RIUM is trying to reconstruct this again. So the heart set is equally important than with the mindset. And talking about high tech, we also need to talk about the high touch. How do you humanize education and technology at the same time? All right? So this expansion is what we are going into. If you want to talk about the future is about this expansion, this awareness, this inclusivity and engulfing people together, working for the survival of the human species and the planet. This is where the climate change, the global warming comes in, right? And then you're bringing back the soul. How do you bring back the soul? Because we bring in the values at the same time. That we need to sympathize. What's happening in Gaza now, we cannot go to Gaza, but yet we will sympathize with what's happening in Gaza, with what's happening in Israel, for that matter, because they are the human persons that are also involved, right? The moment you can be with them, then you exhibit this empathy, where you need to go down and work with them. And this is where the university are now doing this. At least in my university, every student now needs to work with the community and empathize with them. You no longer read about poverty in an air-conditioned room and know these are the 5 reasons for poverty, and then answer your questions in the exams and get an A grade, but still have not seen poverty. Here the students will go down to the community and experience what poverty is in the bare truth of what poverty is all about. And suddenly when the book says there's 5 factors of poverty, they found more than 5 factors, maybe 10 factors that it's not written in the book, because the book is written by somebody else anyway. It is not by them. And we need to rewrite our own book so that it becomes relevant to them. And then the students will come back to me, say, Tan Sri, 3 weeks in the community is better than 3 years in the university. We learn without textbooks. We learn without teachers. We are now able to think for ourselves. We learn the wisdom of the community that's been forgotten. Now we can join with them and talk about how to co-create knowledge, how to co-learn, how to actually work together as a community that is relevant to one another. It's not about the university being ranked number 10 in the world, but the community is still number 1,000, long lost in terms of developing the community and the human beings in that community. And that is what it is all about in terms of empathy. How do you learn how to empathize? If you cannot empathize with your neighbor, then you can forget about empathizing with anybody else, right? And so this kita jaga kita thing is all about moving your heart set into the right place so that you can live together as a human species. And the final The final thing is, of course, compassion. It becomes unconditional. Being a person who are educated, it becomes your responsibility. Without credits, without a credential, without recognition, without anything, it becomes your duty to help people who need help. Because you are already privileged to get that information, and you are already privileged to be taught how to do it, and therefore you go out and perform your duty to salvage or to save the situation, as it were. That will be the highest mark as far as education is concerned. And therefore we talk about in our university now to change this or to transform this into a detoxification sort of process where everybody works together, not in silos anymore. I want to work this because there is a mission to do as far as human being is concerned, as far as humanity is concerned. And therefore we use the word humanizing education. What do we mean by this? We mean that the person that comes out of the university must be a better human person first before they become a better engineer or a doctor or a politician. Here we are trying to create better engineers, better doctors, better politicians, and it becomes the worst of human beings. And you can see from the kind of policy that they produce at the end of the day. Right? And sometimes only for a group of people, not the general masses that needs to be also spoken for the first time. So how do you detoxify this is a question that I want to come in very quickly. If I get through this, and probably my message is done. Yeah? So what is the new model? Our new model is, maybe Siva knows, our favorite word is sejahtera. And this word sejahtera has been here for many times. Salam sejahtera, sejahtera Malaysia, Kedah sejahtera, whatever. Many things are sejahtera. Sejahtera economy. But what is sejahtera? Anybody? What is sejahtera? When you say sejahtera, there must be something that you are trying to convey. What is it you are trying to convey? All right? And this sejahtera becomes a key word because it is where a basis of this community being built upon. Yeah? And how do I say that? Because this is where I think, this is where I think the source of power is. Not only youth, but the whole community works on it. Because if you talk about the community, then I will just confine it in the community. The source of power, the source of empowerment rather than just power, will be this word sejahtera. That you want everything in a peaceful, harmonious state. That you want everything in a very collaborative state. That you want everything in a state of balance. That you want everything that people can share. The so-called misi kebersamaan. These are all about sejahtera, but it is not defined just by one word. It is a multi-thing that we will talk about later on. I want to make sure that this is a Malaysian product. Forget about what other universities say or what other countries say. We have got our own solution to create the sejahtera within our own context. And how do you do it? Yeah? We need to go back to education. And for many years, I've been talking about the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan, the national philosophy of education. How many of you know that we have got a philosophy of education? Yeah? Many of us do not know. This was done when the present Prime Minister was the Education Minister then. His brainchild, right? Previous Prime Minister may not be interested in this, but I'm sure this Prime Minister should be interested. But so far, his two ministers has not talked about the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan. Why is it important? Because the word sejahtera was taken out from this context. It is not something that we pluck from the thin air. And there's no document that I've seen now, be it political, be it ideological, be it economic, be it whatever, where the word sejahtera is used in the sense that it is used in this document of falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan that goes back to 1988 and then 1996 when it is renewed. Yeah? It is where we build the community, where we build the country, where we build the whole world as it is. Right? How do I say that? The English version is like this, but I refuse to translate the word kesejahteraan diri because it stands on its own. It's just like the Japanese word ikigai. You cannot translate ikigai because Ikigai has its own word. You cannot translate the African word Ubuntu, because it has its own meaning. Yeah? And every community has got its own equivalent of sejahtera. Ubuntu, Yin and Yang, Ikigai, Lagom in Sweden. Every community has got its own pristine way of understanding what sejahtera is all about, that it becomes a human heritage that we need to connect and make sure that the world survive in that particular level. Okay? So that's the word sejahtera that is there and without being translated. So what is sejahtera? In a very simple way, that's the word, yeah? And we take this word out. And you will see the first thing that S will be sejahtera, seimbang, balance. And you have this H is harmonious. And that's the word there. Insan yang seimbang dan harmonis. You have to be a balanced and harmonious person. Where in the classroom you are taught to be this? Yeah? If at all we are taught to be a very competitive person, that could be imbalanced and not harmonious. Because we are trying to drive another target which is actually not part of us. It's part of the other system that we are not subscribing to. Okay? We talk about jasmani, we talk about akal, which is intellect, we talk about emotion, we talk about rohani, spirituality, the two things that was almost absent when we talk about the COVID-19. We know how to live physically, food and so on and so forth. We know how to find those food. We can be thinking intellectually, finding a solution, but emotionally, we have no resiliency, we have no coping mechanism. We lost our spiritual being, and hence the suicide, the depression, the anxiety, and the mental health. These are the two things that was absent in the pre-COVID days that we need. And the Falsafah Pendidikan has talked about that. And he says when you talk about seimbang, it has to be seimbang in that particular context. Intellect, rohani, emosi, jasmani. So when I say I'm a balanced human being, balanced in what? In these four things. I must know how to manage myself intellectually, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We may be good at two, intellectual and physical. I don't think we are good at emotional and spiritual. But that alone makes us already, quote unquote, a dehumanized person. We are not the complete holistic human being that we are supposed to be. And we will not be able to survive if that's the case. And where does this come from? It says, it doesn't come from Harvard, no, it just comes from Cambridge or Oxford. It doesn't come from UNESCO. Yeah? It comes from, dia kata, ketaatan dan kepatuhan kepada Tuhan, and underline the word Tuhan as per the Rukun Negara. Not any one God, not any one deity, not any one, icons or whatever. It's God. And it says, that is the one that akan memberi kita what is the outcome? Your character and also your ethics. So if you go through this falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan, the word sejahtera is already spelled out there. Seimbang, etika, jasmani, intellect, harmoni, ketuhanan, emosi, akhlak dan rohani. Spell it out, it becomes sejahtera. And all these are embedded in this. So when you talk about sejahtera, you must make sure that these are all part and parcel of that ingredient, and that's why it is not able, we are not able to translate it into English because it's multi-layered. And at the end of the day, we talk about saya insan sejahtera because the last statement will say that if you are sejahtera, then you can, then you can menyumbang kepada keharmonian keluarga dan masyarakat. People ask me why there's so much bullying in schools. Because they know only about bullying. They have not experienced sejahtera, and therefore they cannot dispense sejahtera. If you don't experience peace, you cannot dispense peace. If you are just about, destruction, then all you dispense is destruction. Because that's the only thing that you know. It's our school teaching about sejahtera at the end of the day. Not 5 A's, but kesejahteraan which is better than 5 A's. If you got sejahtera, you definitely will be a 5 A student. You don't have to worry about it. Right? So Then the final outcome when you talk about akhlak, instead it will be saya insan sejahtera. Dan insan sejahtera itu is that whole person that actually goes through this process of the humanized education system, not the inhuman education system the way it is structured today. Yeah? Humanized in a way, the total person, I always use the cyclist. Yeah? If you want to move on, you must imagine yourself as riding a bicycle. To ride a bicycle, you must be in a state of balance. If you are not in a state of balance, you cannot ride a bicycle and you will not move. All right? So that balance and the activity that you have must coincide with one another. In other words, a three-ish. The head, the heart, and the hand must be in synchrony when you ride a bicycle or drive a car for that matter. Okay? And this whole person idea is basically the idea that UNESCO is talking to us about. How do you train this whole idea of a person so that you can create a whole family, so that you can a whole community, so you can create a whole government, so that you can create a whole world. It's no longer this compartmentalization between STEM and arts, and no, it's no longer there. Everything must come together in one piece to create that particular harmony and to create that particular future that we are talking about. Yeah? So then it becomes, when we have this holistic development, then the student, the youth empower become the youth empowerment. You are able to decide. And I have got the advantage of this before AWANI comes in the 70s. I was a student there, that shows how old I am. Yeah? At that time, we do not have to have any permission to do anything in the university. The Vice Chancellor respects our right, and we acknowledge the existence of the Vice Chancellor. We organize things that we need to organize, using our own wisdom as students, as youth at that particular time. And one of the things that University Science Malaysia is known for is every week that all of us will go to the community and look after the community and see what is defective in the community and see how we can put it right. Beginning with simple things like giving them a tuition class, particularly in the rural areas. Teach them about maths, teach them about English, and teach them about science. So that the next week when they go to school, they know exactly what they are doing. And without fail, we will go to all the community in Penang and to ensure that they have got the same right that other privileged students have got when they go for tuitions and so on and so forth. Yeah? Nobody tells us, no credit for this, but because we wish we are that person who can deliver this empathy and this compassion to the community at the end of it. What will be my soft skills? My soft skill is how to tame the dogs. Sometimes you go to a community, the first thing they do is to release the dog so that you don't come and interfere with their lifestyle. Yeah? And our soft skill is not about making presentation 15 minutes of what you want to do and how many monies you want to bring. It's how to tame the dog. How to make the dog feel comfortable so that we can move on to the community and talk to the people in the community and build trust with the community. That is what the university is all about. And that is the empowerment that we begin to understand, that we are capable of without even the university interfering us, without telling us what to do. We've got a mind of our own, we've got a heart of our own, and we've got the capacity to work with ourselves. And that is empowerment. But I don't see this happening today. And I would want to record my disappointment when you talk about the vape story. When the Minister of Health delisted nicotine, that people below the age of 18 now can buy nicotine at their own will. There's no law to govern them anymore. That the toilets in schools becomes a lab for experimentation for nicotines now, because they are allowed to smoke nicotine in school. Is no longer illegal. Yeah? But there's no youth protest on this. It begins in April the 1st, and there are 3 promises that they will table this law on the tobacco control. Until now, nothing has happened. And it's extended to 8 months. And you imagine how many thousands of students are victimized by this idea that nicotine is okay. It's like a chewing gum. You can buy it. And you can see now at Pasar Malam, people are selling this. And children are buying this. And we cannot say no anymore because it becomes their rights. We are not compassionate enough to protect our own group of people that has been victimized by a law that is almost dehumanizing. These are the issues that I want to bring to you. Some of these things are not rocket science. Some of these things we can launch it quite immediately. And that's why I asked the organizers, after this, what do we do? Do we sit back and, and mull what we do? There are many things that you can do. I would like to just invite you to my university that you can find out many things that we can do together. So how do you create this empowerment? And to make it real so that the people on the ground will know that we mean business and we can deliver as a group of people who are committed to the well-being of our own people and the world at large. Yeah? So, and we have even written a book on this, all right? And the book has even got a national prize, but still there's no takers as far as that's concerned. So we want to enlarge this. We want to enlarge this. Alhamdulillah, my university has taken this on, and I hope other universities will also follow through, including your Yayasan Perdana in this particular score. Yeah? But people say this is not science, but I will just quote this guy who wrote about the fourth industrial revolution. In one of his quotations, he said, there are 4 ingredients in true leadership. The brain is definitely one. He talks about the soul. He talks about the heart. The 2 things that I've been talking before this. And he also talks about the goodness. Goodness means the courage to say it and to tell truth to power that they are wrong and we want to put it right. And it's only our duty to do so, be a youth or otherwise. Yeah? So the word is not modal insan. This is something that was smuggled in 2007 by the Prime Minister then and introduced this word modal insan. I just want to finish this off. Modal insan is going back to the Industrial Revolution, working for, quote-unquote, a kind of, corporate sectors that bring in profits for certain group of people, exploiting the other group of people, and so on and so forth. And this is what we are trying to now also diminish at the same time. We talk about insan sejahtera and not modal insan. And this is a text that I'm using. There is a text that comes from Human Capital Theory and Education. It is in an encyclopedia for education and psychology. And there are many texts, and I just want to read you 2 or 3 paragraphs just to give you the insight of it. You can read more. Yeah? The first paragraph talks about throughout Western countries, all right, we are not Western to start off with, education has been re-theorized. The question you're asking, why do you need to re-theorize? And the reason to re-theorize is so that under the human capital theory, everything becomes an economic device, including education. So the final outcome of education is about economy and economy alone. So Kabole, Pasaran, and all those things are those jargons that they are adopting. Yeah? Human capital theory is the most influential theory of the Western education, setting up the framework for government policies since the 1960s. It is increasingly a key determinant for the economic performance and therefore the ranking. All right? And further, sometimes this theory is also difficult to. Why is it not working now? Is it time up? No? But anyway, the other statements talk about you cannot even modify this. It says the human capital theory is about the this economic interest of the individual. In other words, if you want me to give a talk today, I will ask the organizer, I'm going to give a talk, what do I get out of this? Right? Or they say maybe 300 ringgit according to the government circular. I say, no. I'm a rector of the university, professor emeritus. I don't play with 300 ringgit. You can keep your 300 ringgit. I'm busy today. Today is Sunday anyway. I'm not coming. Yeah? Because my self-economic interest is not met. And therefore, and this is what's happening today. When I ask the students to do this, Tan Sri, ini bukan KPI saya. Ini KPI orang lain buatlah. Yeah? Ataupun ask them to do something, how many credits do I get out of this? No credits, I will not do it. It becomes a very transactional process. It is no longer a learning process. And this is what the modal insan has done to us. Yeah? Framework of government policies, and here you are. In the human capital theory, all human behaviors are based on economic self-interest of the individual, no longer the community. Operating within freely competitive market, other forms of behavior are excluded and threatened as a distortion of that model. No wonder then the youth do not want to work together, because everybody is thinking of themselves. I am first, the community comes second, if at all. Yeah? So there are many more. I will not go into it. The terminology that we talk about, technological change, research, innovation, productivity, education, are all metaphors of the economic interest of this modal insan. So we need to get away from this and substitute it into something else. We recommend Insan Sejahtera, so that the whole question of youth and youth empowerment can be embedded within that understanding. So I will stop there. Yeah, we'll just end up with this summary. Yeah, we are supposed to engage the world in the university, all right? But our engagement has always been on the external part, using just the mind, the brain, or whatever you have. And it's basically egocentricity that we want to promote ourselves before anything else. Okay? Now we need to balance that by using the other dimension, which is the heart set that we talked about, direct on our inner world so that we can be spiritually accountable at the same time. That's about me and me alone, that I know who I am and I know what I'm supposed to do, and I feel guilty if I don't do it, because it is me that I'm talking about. Yeah? And how can you put this together so that at the end of the day we have a higher conscience as far as the purpose of education or purpose of youth is concerned, giving spirituality a place to breathe and a place also to make their presence felt, humanizing education and balancing things together in the context of Sejahtera. So I hope I've given you some indication of what we are thinking about and how do you go about this, and hopefully we can follow through the discussion, inshallah. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dzulkifli, for sharing your thoughts on this topic. Tan Sri, would you kindly remain on stage for the Q&A session?
All right, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now open the floor for any questions related to our topic today, the power of youth building a better future in the face of economic and environmental challenges. There are microphones on both sides of the hall. Please queue up for your turn and wait for my signal. Before you ask your question, please introduce yourself as well as the organization you represent. In the interest of time, please keep your question brief and related to the topic. Thank you.
Boleh dalam bahasa Melayu kan?
Boleh, that's right.
Boleh. Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Are there any questions?
Oh, I thought only students.
From the floor?
Okay. Can you pass the mic to Prof?
Prof?
Assalamualaikum, Tan Sri.
Salam.
I'm still your student, sir. Tan Sri, in short, final chapter of IR 4.0, you rightly mentioned that you mentioned 4 things, which when I read through it, I immediately remember about the first part. I remember it by Jerry, like the backward, which is just money, mostly, and intellect, wrongly intellect. But Schwab also talked about collective wisdom. Can you elaborate more on that?
About politics?
Collective wisdom. The final chapter.
Yeah. At the end of the day, for example, just let me give you a simple analogy. When we talk about ChatGPT, yeah, everybody is so engrossed about ChatGPT. We do not know where to place this ChatGPT now. Even in university, I think some university has even banned the use of ChatGPT because it is out of our control. Okay? When we talk about this collective wisdom of the holistic wisdom, we must understand that we have got not just artificial intelligence, we also have natural intelligence, which in our word we call fitra. We were born with that fitra. We are called digital native. We are not born with this digital thing with us. You know, I don't know, I don't like this word digital native because I am not digital native. I am spiritual native because I'm born with that set of values, the way I can manage myself spiritually, and that's where the heart becomes important because that's where the seed of that spirituality is all about. As much as you cannot be thinking if you don't develop your brain well, or you don't have that algorithm to start you to think critically, the same thing. If you don't develop your heart as a seat of intellect that interprets all the knowledge that you've got spiritually within you, then you are not going to get that wisdom at the end of the day. You're almost, being that human capital that we talked about. So the holistic wisdom is basically how do you merge this together. We are not saying that the brain is not important. Research has shown, and I've been following this for the last 20 years, we thought initially that everything originates from the brain, and the brain directs the heart to feel or to work things the way it is. But now research has shown in the last 5 years that the heart communicates with the brain 6 times more than the brain communicates with the heart. In fact, there are neurons that is in the brain, it is also embedded in the heart, that the heart is independent on its own sometimes when you are brain dead. The human being is still there. The fitra is still there. It is a very powerful finding to show that we are spiritual native. Just because the Renaissance has thrown this out from some sort of a biblical sort of argument which is not applicable to some of us, doesn't mean that it is not relevant anymore. So my ChatGPT is my heart. Why do we pray 5 kali satu hari? Is to get in touch with it through that ChatGPT. Yeah? And that's been there for a long time before this AI make a hoo-ha out of it. But we have not turned it on, we have not even switched it on. Sometimes we don't even realize that it's there. Jadi semayang kita tunggang-tunggik gini, and we are still the same devil that we were. Because we never connect or use the ChatGPT that is divinely given to us. I'm not trying to be ustad, I'm never ustad, but we have gained from this. Dan selagi jantung kita tidak berdetik, you will never know whether it's right or wrong. You will come to that level that your moral compass is within you. That you decide what is it right and what it is wrong, because your ChatGPT is already being nourished, being trained, and being educated the way it should be. That is education. And that education is missed throughout my career, and now I feel very, very quote-unquote guilty when I'm in USM. Yeah, we are trying to put this on board, but it's not easy. So 50,000 people has graduated from USM under my watch. When they take the scroll, the question kita ask, dia ni boleh dapat kerja ke tidak? Will be he employed? But the question we need to ask when these people graduate, is he a balanced human person? Is he a harmonious human person? Is he divinely dedicated to God consciousness? So that's where the good is all about. When these people are created that way, definitely they will be employable, rather than the crooks get employed. Yeah? And that's why, alhamdulillah, when we talk about this, then people will talk, I like budak-budak IUM. I'm not saying this is a global thing, but some of the comments, they are good, they're hardworking, and they're also ethically responsible. That word ethically responsible is not heard now, as it should be for all people who are well educated. You find the most corrupted people are people with degrees. Yeah? The whole rigmarole of one MDB, they are all educated people. They are not the kampung people. They are not our father and mother who have not gone to the universities. They are people with degrees, overseas degrees, and yet they are not carrying themselves the way that they should be carrying as an educated people should be in the question of ethics, morality, and also integrity. That is the final outcome of this education. And I hope I am right in this particular sense. I don't know if I'm wrong, then I apologize for it. I hope I make sense on this. Yeah. There's no compromise. Bagi saya, there's no compromise anymore. Yeah. And now with the debates, now we have started the debate, alhamdulillah. We've gone to Doha, I think last week, and we're presenting almost the same thing. And say, look, we have been shortchanged by the kind of education that you put on us as a colony. You know, there's nothing wrong with Malaysian punya education system. And I give you an example. The idea of an International Islamic University started by whom? By Zabah. Zabah in the 1917 asked a question, mengapa kita tidak boleh gabungkan ilmu ketuhanan dengan ilmu dunia? In 1917, mind you, a Malay intellectual has moved this question. But it takes 50 years to realize it under the patronage of the late Engku Omar. He presented a paper, and that paper was later on brought to the Mecca Conference of 1977. And people thought this is an idea from the Mecca Conference. No. You go to my university, we have put the record straight. It starts originally from Malaysian, and it's a local idea of what education should be, which is now engulfing a kind of a global idea. That people are beginning to talk about the integration of knowledge. There's no longer science and arts, there's no longer this and that. Everybody must know a bit of everything. And that is the Islamic culture. In the 10th century of Andalusia, people at Al-Kindi know 17 disciplines. Yeah? Be it science, be it music, be it pharmacy, be it philosophy, be it astronomy, he knows. Testimony to that, he has written 200 books without computers. I've got a PhD. How many books have I written? And my PhD is just part of a small subject. And I call myself an expert. That's why reading CV is very embarrassing. Yeah? He's an expert in WHO. Yeah? WHO can't even control COVID-19. Yeah? He's an expert in this and that. And we can't even control the world. Yeah? Again, other civilization, zero is produced by whom? By the Indians, Brahmagupta. There was no zero in the Roman letters, 1, V, X, and whatever it is. You try to put X plus V plus 3I, what is the answers? Nobody knows, because there's no zero. And here Brahmagupta took it and introduced zero. The Arabic people embellish it, and it's called an Arabic numerals now. Yeah? And the Westerners took it and put it into their algorithm and called it this binary thing, 0 and 1. And they create this softwares and whatever it is. Now, when you want to use the software, suddenly this word human, intellectual copyright. You want to use this, you have to pay because I created this. You took it from Brahmagupta, how much do you pay to Brahmagupta? Oh, it's public domain. I can use it. So people are beginning to monopolize knowledge for their own needs and deprive others from the needs of it. And that is no longer knowledge. In our case, the Prophet say, you know one word, you teach one word. You don't say, Prophet doesn't say, you know one word, you teach one word and ask for copyrights. That's not us. And that's why the Muslim world at that particular time was very prolific before people are accessible. You go to Andalusia, what are they proud of? Their libraries, not their supermarkets, not their malls. We are proud of our malls. How many bookstores are there in the malls that you visited? Alhamdulillah, there is one. But mainly there's none. So the whole culture has to be shifted again. That library, that books, that reading, that writing, that debates, that dissent is important to advance. Not to just anggo-anggo, baik YB. 4IR, okay baby, tomorrow I give you. No. We need to ask everything, and that's why USM during my time is called University Suka Melawan. USM. We'll ask all the detailed questions that needs to be asked before we are satisfied, before we do the job. And that is the role of youth. You must be our checkpoint. Because it's your world that we are talking about. My world is gone. My world has done horrendously bad to make you suffer like this. But the game must change. If we don't change the game, then all of us needs to be accountable. Thanks for that question. Any more questions?
Any more questions? Okay.
Sila.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I am Ikuti. I am from CFS IIM Gambang. And my question is...
Gambang IUM?
Yeah, IUM.
Okay.
Just now when Tansri was talking about when Tansri was trying to ask the students of IUM to do something, they would expect something, right? So from here I noticed that our culture has become so ingrained with materialism. And also, Tansri also mentioned the copyright, that people are now copyrighting ideas, that they want money for their ideas. And this is so ingrained into our culture, and even I myself can't avoid expecting something when I do something. So how can this be changed? That is my question. Thank you.
Well, I think basically it depends on who do you think, what is your responsibility? Let's put it that way. Yeah? I'm given this whole load of knowledge that before I go to the university, I'm zero. All of us are zero. Before you step to university, you are zero. You are not an engineer, neither you are a doctor, you are nobody. Yeah? After spending 4 years in the university, you are then somebody. Then what would be then your responsibility to the people who are not able to go to the university? You must make them somebody also at the same time. And what's the best way to do it? Is to work with them and make sure they also benefit from what you have got. At that point, you do not ask anything from, because kita returning the favor. You know, it's not as though that I do this on my own, and therefore this copyright business, dia kata dia punya aja. But so many of these copyright ideas are ideas that is borrowed. Read a book called The Theft of History by Jack Goody, emeritus professor of Cambridge. Dia mengatakan most of the things that is happening today in the so-called Western civilization are either borrowed or stolen from a different culture. It's just that they refuse to recognize that. In our academic world, if you borrow an idea, you acknowledge. But they don't practice that either. Yeah? And now I was reading a news yesterday, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom are angry with the Prime Minister of Greek because the Greeks are asking back, give all our artifacts in your museum. It belongs to us. You have stolen them. Give it back. You go to the British Museum, it's the best place where stolen things are kept. And we pay money to see them. You know, in other words, we're encouraging to steal more. Itu yang dia boleh steal, yang kita tahu. Kita punya idea macam dikatakan oleh Jack Goody tadi. And we don't want to be part of that culture. We don't want to be part of that culture that really takes stolen ideas and say it's ours and then earn money out of that. That is not what education is all about. Education macam itulah yang tidak mendatangkan barakah. It is a different story altogether. Di mana datangnya the return is the barakah daripada Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. You are not successful until there's a barakah in there. You may have a big car, big house, big wife, big husband. If there's no barakah in there, you are not successful. You think you are successful, but you are in a state of misery. And you can see sometimes, you know, the richest of the rich are even worse than the poorest of the poor. And once you learn this idea of a barakah, you are free of anything. You don't have to think of siapa nak, who wants to reward you. And I come today, and what do I get of this Yayasan Perdana? Tak ada, tak payahlah. I don't get anything, man. No press coverage, you know. Nobody want to take my autograph, and tak payahlah, you know. But no, you come here because it's your duty, and after that, langsai, alhamdulillah, you go back. Malam you tidur, selesai. That is a kind of attitude I think all of us must have. If that is the attitude that we have, then this country will prosper. I'll give you another example. when I talk about the sejahtera, there's one slide that I didn't show you. There is already Pusat Sejahtera di Korea. Yeah? If you can go back to the last slide, I forgot to put. It is already a Sejahtera center in a place called Tongyong in Korea. How did this happen? When I was a VC in USM, 2 academics from Korea came and said, you have been talking about the Sejahtera thing and the concept of Sejahtera. Tell us what it is all about. So give them a simple explanation what it is all about. And I didn't know. In 2015, they called me back, can you officiate the Sejahtera Center? Which is worth, they have already invested in the Sejahtera Center, 20 juta US, 20 million US. You can see a whole campus that you can live in a Sejahtera way, the way the Malays were living then. And I asked them, why do you want to create the Sejahtera Center? You do not know, they kata, in 1970s, we came to Malaysia and we borrowed the idea of gotong royong. They kata, Korea is able to supersede Malaysia because of gotong royong. You were the same. During my time, Korea and Malaysia is the same. Now they are so far up because they use gotong royong to develop their country as a community. Now they kata we are almost at the pinnacle of the materialism that you talk about. We are now infested with this question of spiritual poverty, as it were. Yeah? And we are trying to find this out. You go to Korea now, every bridge there will be a boat, a rescue boat. Because every bridge, and on average, 50 orang akan try to jump and commit suicide. Although the education system in Korea is good, but their suicide rate is the best. Right? So they kata there's a disconnect. And how do you get the disconnect? They kata we want to learn sejahtera from you so that we think this is the way to moderate what we have got in the material sense. So the Koreans understand this, but the Malaysians are still not understanding this because it doesn't come from the West. Maybe, I don't know. But we need to come back to terms and see where we can put this on for the same reason of trying to balance the community, inshallah. Yep. Okay.
Since we are running out of time, maybe we can have one more question from the gentleman on the right.
Can I have a quick question?
Yep.
Assalamualaikum Tan Sri.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Baik, seperti mana lazim mendengar kuliah ataupun sarahan Tan Sri sentiasa memberi pandangan dan juga idea-idea baru. Being an alumni of UIA, saya ingin dapatkan pandangan Tan Sri tentang menggunakan adab dan juga kearifan tempatan ataupun local wisdom sebagai satu ubat untuk meletakkan semula kefahaman umum bahawa kita sedang melalui perubahan yang sebenar dan memajukan semula adab ini bukan sahaja di kalangan orang-orang muda tetapi juga yang berlaku berumur. Sekian, terima kasih.
Terima kasih, soalan yang baik. Bila kita bercakap tentang sustainable development, terjemahannya adalah pembangunan lestari ataupun pembangunan mampan. Dalam Madani, M tu mampan, M. Tapi kalau kita pergi ke kampung, kita tanya makcik, lestari ke hari ni? We think, how does a makcik reply? Ataupun makcik, mampan ke hari ni? One makcik is quite, apa dia kata, makcik tak pakai lestari, makcik pakai Listerine. Because Listerine is a better brand than lestari. You know? Now what does it mean? It means we are translating this word, pembangunan lestari, into a term that we don't even understand. And therefore we think this whole concept of sustainable development is a foreign concept. When I stepped in UIA tahun 2018, and introduced sustainable development, all of them rejected it. They kata this is not an Islamic concept, this is a secular concept brought by the United Nations, and we are not willing to accept it. All right? And this is, I think, one of the handicap as far as pembangunan lestari is concerned. And that's why we're finding the words for. So we do some research. And we go to Bali, Balu ada the subak system, you know, the rice fields, the terrace rice field, the wonderful thousands and thousands of acres of the rice field. Yeah. And dia ada 3 konsep dia tu, namanya Trikita Karana. Relationship man to man, relationship man to nature, and relationship man to God. Yeah. And that concept has existed more than 900 years. And is still surviving now. Right? Compared to the Pembangunan Lestari, which is now 30 years. So where do you think you can gain more knowledge on sustainable development? From Bali or from United Nations? Certainly it's from Bali. We are not happy, we go to Bhutan. And you also see Bhutan, the GNH, Gross National Happiness. Dia tak pakai GDP. Yeah? Bhutan introduced it in 1970, everybody laughed at Bhutan. How do you measure happiness? You cannot even count like you count money. Right? But when you go to Bhutan, Bhutan tunjukkan saya dia punya constitution, I think 600 years in the 1700s or earlier than that, 1400s agaknya. Yeah? Dia kata the government of the day must bring happiness to the people of Bhutan. The word is happiness, not economic wealth, macam modal insan. If the government fail to do this, then the government has no right to exist in their own constitution. Maknanya their value is about happiness. And that's why they want to track GNH, Gross National Happiness. In other words, dia punya pembangunan lestari itu dah ada sana 600 years. And if you use that constitutional thing in Malaysia, I think many of our governments do not have the right to exist because they make our life miserable. They don't bring happiness to us. Yeah? And that's why they create a massive way of understanding what. And they've got even tracking, misalnya, at the age, a group of youth age. When they look at the Western punya happiness level go down, using their measure, of course, and their happiness level is going up. And it meets their target. So that's another example. You go to Thailand, the former king, the one that passed away, already got the concept of sustainable, what we call sufficiency economy, which translates about the same thing. Yeah, menggunakan moderation. That's why Thailand doesn't want to be an Asian tiger. Kita sibuk nak jadi Asian tiger. Yeah? But they don't want to be Asian tiger because they want to moderate things. So that everybody has got everything at the same time, not the rich with the rich and the poor and the poor. And so maknanya for us, it's already embedded in the culture, and that's why we use the word sejahtera for this. Because it's already embedded in the culture for a long time. It is not something that we learn from the West, that try to change our own way of life. No. Now you go to the makcik hari ni sejahtera, makcik hari ni sejahtera betul katanya. Because they faham apa itu sejahtera. And you see how they live. And they live in a minimalist way. Bukan macam kita. Yeah? And so this is a thing that I think your question is right. How do you bring back the forgotten culture, the forgotten wisdom, and how do you bring this back? By working with the community. My students now come back and tell me, we learned this from the community. Why are not we putting it into the classroom? It's almost like a tacit knowledge that they've learned, not from books, but from the experiential learning. And I think that's the enriching part as far as this sustainable development is concerned. I'm with you. Kearifan ketempatan ni, tapi kearifan tempatan ni dia ada juga kadang-kadang the economic thing. Ini boleh dijual dan dia lebih arif daripada yang lain. We don't want to get into that kind of mixed up once again. So what is here in terms of our culture is something that we want to build up so that other cultures can also learn from us, inshallah. So thank you very much for your time and thank you very much for your kind attention. And I ask thanks for you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Thank you for the engaging keynote session. Would you kindly remain on stage? I invite Yang Berusaha Mr. Mahmud Razak Bahman, accompanied by Yang Berusaha Puan Zarina Abu Bakar, to present a token of appreciation on behalf of Perdana Leadership Foundation to our keynote speaker. Dipersilakan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Dzulkifli, Mr. Mahmoud and Puan Zarina. I invite you to return to your seat.
If I may just say, the School of Architecture's loss is the gain of the education industry. Thank you very much, Tan Sri. Well done.